Hello fellow Nazi killers, I'm King Link and today I'm reviewing Wolfenstein 2, the new Colossus. Now I'm a huge fan of the recent game Wolfenstein the New Order. It had a ton of action, a story that kept up with the high octane ride that it was going on, and just an absolute blast to just kill Nazis. Really, that's what Wolfenstein is about to me. Now graphically, this game is a huge step up in my opinion. Yes, my new hardware is definitely showing off here, but I did try out the old game, and this game just looks cleaner and better in almost every way. Especially the gun models of what BJ Blazkowicz is carrying around look extremely good, and the levels are clean and defined. The enemies look good as well, and the game looks really nice, even for a 2-year-old game at this point. Now, the downside of this is that I think it's because the graphics aren't trying to do as much. Most levels are rather plain in my opinion, and there's only a few collectible objects that really make them stand out. While that's fine for the game, there's a simple color palette for almost every level, a level design that's quite basic, and an aesthetic that's hardly memorable to me. There's an awesome Flying Fortress level that's the second in the game. I'll probably try to show it somewhere here, and it feels the same as the level that's based on the inside of a wall. And they all look the same as a level that takes place in a U-boat, with just a tinting swap and maybe a level layout difference. I'll try to show a few different levels in the game, but while they're nice, I just would have loved a more narrative elements infused with the level design. I mean, going back and playing the first level of the New Order feels like night and day here, and that level feels so much more interesting, even if it doesn't look as good. Though, yeah, the narrative is also going to be a problem here. Now, I think if there's a big problem with Wolfenstein 2, and there is, it's the story. I like the story a lot in Wolfenstein the New Order. It's not great, but it tried to have, a loud, explosive story, and did so for the most part, and it works. Wolfenstein 2's story, it tries to be deeper, a little more cerebral, and honestly, that could be really interesting. The problem is, while you're already seeing the gameplay, this isn't a game for subtlety. This is an action game of the highest order, and the game really tries to keep that up. And, the cutscenes try to do the same thing, and it doesn't work. The opening cutscene should already be playing here, and God, I hate this cutscene. The problem comes in about halfway through it, though. I'll make sure to be showing this scene, though, and we'll see BJ's father's coming in. And at first, he's talking about who his son is hanging out with, and he says the N-word. Yeah, okay, racists are in the game, we already get that. They showed Ku Klux Klan members and all. I get it. And that would be fine. But it doesn't stop there. BJ's dad goes off and uses the N-word again, so he's really racist, okay. But then he starts ranting about Jews, hits his wife, chokes his son. I mean, Jesus, what is wrong with Wolfenstein 2? This is the least subtle way to make a point, and this is the beginning of the game. You could have stopped him at just saying the N-word once, and I think we probably would have disliked his father just as much. But whoa, we're not done yet. Then you're taken down a hall, and you're forced to shoot your dog in a horrible scene, with the dog whimpering and chained up in front of you. Now, you can sit there, and it makes you pull the trigger at some point. You can shoot around the dog. But the first time I saw the scene, I waited almost 5 minutes, hoping the game would give me an out. Not, being able to believe this is how it's opening the game. But nope, you can miss the dog, which I did, and I'll do here as well, because there's no way I'm going to shoot a dog. But then the father grabs the gun and shoots the dog anyway, just in case you somehow liked him at this point. Now, the fact is, this whole scene that I've been describing, and as you're seeing, is an 11. The entire game is this big, explosive game, and the fact is, Wolfenstein 2 is trying to tell an interesting story, with a lot of different themes. The big one here is the sins of the father. There's also this great question of how BJ is dealing with a body that's letting him down. Discussions of BJ having kids, knowing that he'll be dead before they grow up. That's not a spoiler of the game. That's just where the game starts at, as you'll be seeing in between the father scenes. And actually, a stupid spoiler happens, but I won't talk about that. The thing is, for almost every topic in the game, there's a lot of nuance needed to talk about the subject matter that Wolfenstein 2 tries to discuss. nuance that the game can't deliver on when it's trying to tell the most story. You know, the most outlandish, the most extreme, the most violent story. They want to talk about the sins of the father, but instead they wrote about the father like he's a huge monster who's going to appear as the Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan. But he's not. I mean, yes, you do face him later in the game, obviously, but it's in no way a major encounter, like it's built up to be. You know, the fact is, both of the main villains here should have been these major moments in the game, and both are lackluster, but I'll try to talk about that more in the gameplay sections. Now, on the other hand, I do want to say one thing about the story. Frau Engel, the villainess from the first game, really the purpose of the story even existing has BJ kind of chasing her, and that's where the game should have been focused the entire game. She has amazing scenes in Wolfenstein 2, but they only happen about 3 or 4 times, and they're done in really poor ways where BJ is trapped in one location and only able to turn his head. It's overused, but admittedly she steals the show, and I almost wish that more of the game focused on her because she's a better character. Admittedly, that's because she was in the first game, but still, why is she relegated to such a minor role in this story, even if she appears so often? Now, overall though, the story of Wolfenstein 2, the one that it wants to tell, doesn't work with the style that it's trying to tell the story with. These are big, loud action pieces, but they just stop for 20 to 30 minutes for these long cutscenes, whether it be the Frau Engel or even this opening cutscene, that try to get the momentum going, but really can't because you're locked into one location. There's good characters for the most part. Well, okay, let me just say a few more things and we'll move on. So, just quickly, Anya, BJ's wife, just charges into battle over and over. Now, this is a woman who's heavily pregnant in this game. At the beginning, she's admits that she's pregnant, but she's slowly growing, and at the end of the game, she's definitely getting close. But instead, she's running around a battlefield, shooting guns, vaulting over stuff. She doesn't have some magic ability that only she can fight. There's at least 4 other people who go on most of these trips who just could have gotten out in shotguns just as well as her. But they don't. And actually at the end of the game, well, I bet that number is going to be more like 10 to 20 people. But the one pregnant woman is the only one running around with you on the last level. And no spoilers, but there is a scene in the last level that is pure WTF. I don't want to give it away, but my God, it's insane. And there's so much more that I want to say about the story that's hidden behind these spoilers like that. And more are already known, but I want to keep this spoiler free as much as I can. Though Wolfenstein 2 does have a character die early on, and BJ then spends almost all the rest of the game trying to talk to her in this odd one-sided dialogue that doesn't work. You know, BJ may have built a friendship up, I believe he has in the first game, but BJ's constantly talking to her, and most of us don't care, and what he's saying is kind of loony. And I can't believe I have to talk about this, but, you know, there's a black male character whose only purpose in Wolfenstein 2 seems to be a single sexual joke. I mean, I literally was looking for him multiple times over the course of the game just to see if he had anything else. He has like one other line of dialogue, and that's it. Now, there is other black characters. There's a black female character who's a really strong character, but the fact is, the writing of some of these characters are really poor, especially the ones from the first game, and it's a shame. Overall though, the thing is, Wolfenstein 2 just wants to push the limits and be a little edgier, but in doing it, it's doing it with the wrong material, and Machine Games is definitely better than this. They already have multiple games, and you know what? The New Order is far better than what I found in the new Colossus. So, let's move on. The gunplay, the killing of Nazis is all good. I actually enjoyed myself while I was running around doing, as you can see in this game. Now, I'm going to be trying to do different things, but I should be running around in the open world segments of the game. You know, when you revisit old levels, and I'm trying to go kill some extra enemies. Honestly, they're not that important in the course of the game. I'm not going to talk much about them, but I wanted to film myself doing something here, so that's what we got. And for the most part, you're just running around killing Nazis, And okay, I get that. They're the chocolate of enemies. They aren't that good for you, but you can put it anywhere to make the player more of a hero. There's another discussion for someday for really someone else to have about why Nazis are easy to kill or easy to villainize, similar to zombies, but I'm not really interested in having that conversation today. BJ, though, does start with lower health as part of the story development. As I said, he's kind of dying at the beginning of the game, as you've seen in the early levels, especially when he's in the wheelchair. But later on, you'll get back to the old 100 health point system. You can actually do an interesting thing of overcharging your health in both things. Admittedly, that is in New Order, but it's done much more here. Eating up to 200 points of health and watch it slowly come back down. It's an interesting move, and I kind of like it, but it doesn't do very much. Now, there is a good number of collectibles in the game as well if you want to hunt for them, and while not many will make a big difference, the upgrade kits are definitely the pieces the player will want to search for. They'll give you upgrades to your weapons, though I will say, admittedly, the upgrades don't feel that important here, but it's still a nice way to get subtly more powerful. And similarly, there are this new interesting perk system, and if you do some actions over and over, like use melee combat enough, you'll unlock these perks that make you more powerful. But most of these are rather underwhelming, in my opinion. Carrying an extra throwing hatchet is fine, but when it's talking about 20% damage boosts in certain situations or reductions, honestly, it just feels like a D&D stat-based system or gameplay at that point. And don't get me wrong, I love RPGs. Stats are important, but this is Wolfenstein. This is a man, his gun, and sometimes his other gun, just slaughtering enemies. The stats, I don't know. I think that they're in the wrong place here, and I think also the enemies have gotten significantly more powerful or take more bullets. It doesn't really work as well as in the New Order. Now, there's one other big thing that they've changed up, and it's part of a larger change. Now, I find the game to be very unbalanced in certain ways. The opening game is probably harder, like I was saying, due to your lower life, but maybe easier because I think the enemies are weaker there in the game. Overall, there's some odd difficulty spikes, and I'm not sure, but part of this is from the officer system. Let's first talk about stealth, though, before we get to the officers, because it's combined. The good news is that stealth is not really required in the game. I mean, it's not mandatory, but it works well. BJ is able to sneak up on enemies, kill them stealthily, and I really liked it most of the time. Though trying to fully stealth areas or the entire level sometimes is nearly impossible, and some of it feels like the player has to be waiting a long time to use it, or just aren't supposed to use it for the entire level. I mean, remember, this is the big, loud, explosion-filled game. This isn't made for creeping around carefully and slaughtering Nazis, though you can. So, alright, there are officers in Wolfenstein 2, like I mentioned, and if they're alerted to BJ, they're going to start calling in an infinite number of reinforcements. A few at a time, of course. Now, I don't think there's actually an end to their reinforcement numbers, and at first, this really isn't a problem. The game will tell you how far they are and which direction they are, so that you can get at least a reasonable chance to kill them out, usually an open room. At the later levels, though, they start to tuck them in special rooms. They start to give you multiple levels to have to hunt through, and maybe, there might be two of them, but they're at opposite points in the level. So if you rush one, you have to rush through the entire level or area to get the other one. It's just not a great experience, in my opinion. And those officers, well, they're alerted the first time any enemy in the level sees you, so while stealth isn't required, it's really heavily incentivized for many parts of the game. Now, I want to talk about more. There's the famous Joe's Diner scene that they keep showing off before the game came out at E3 and all. It looks lively and lovely and, beautiful. It's the only scene like that, though. Similarly, the two Ku Klux Klan members in that scene are really the only KKK members you get a good look at. Apparently others do appear, but they're all in the shooting gallery type sections where you're just slaughtering hundreds of enemies. I really don't even remember seeing any of those spooky ghosts. And I honestly could have used more KKK members because they are just as easy to hate as the Nazis. Again, philosophical discussion for someone else that they can dive into. Perhaps we demonize both groups enough that we think they're not worth living. Really, that's someone else's philosophical video, though. And finally, I want to talk about the two major boss encounters of the game. They're the characters from the first game that, admittedly, Frau Engel is amazing on the screen, but really could have used more screen time as she's really not in the first half of the game where she should be. And the first half, honestly, I think the first half of Wolfenstein 2 probably could have been skipped, and we could have got more of the end game or even past where the game ends. And of course, the father, as I mentioned. Now, both of these bosses are weak. They're both done almost as a QTE for how simple it is to kill two major characters, and honestly, either one of these should have been major fights, if not both. There are a couple major moments, big fights in the game, but there's not really boss encounters. And I think Wolfenstein 2 could have been done so much better than this. But that's really the problem I have with Wolfenstein 2. It's not that I'm expecting too much from an FPS, in my opinion, or that it's just a simple shooter. Both of those would have been fine, but when you're spending between 10 to 20 minutes on a single set of cutscenes, the game is trying to tell a story, and I feel like Wolfenstein 2 fails there. The fact is, Wolfenstein: The New Order absolutely nailed its narrative. It's a good story and a good game. Wolfenstein 2, yeah, it's not as good. And that's ultimately the biggest problem I have with Wolfenstein 2. It's not as good as The New Order, and in hindsight, a decent part of me wishes that I had just played through The New Order a second time, or at this point I think it's the fourth time, and that's a bad sign. And because of that, I think that Wolfenstein 2 just doesn't stand up. I give Wolfenstein 2, The New Colossus, a 3 out of 5. And just to be clear, if anyone is still confused about this, it's not subject matter I disliked here. It's not that I feel like the Nazis are too easy to fight. It's that the story that's trying to be told, and I kind of get where it wanted to go, isn't told in anywhere near a good way. And so much of the game focuses on the story that you get random moments rather than a cohesive narrative. A lot of characters from the first game especially aren't developed, and that's fine, but the characters they do focus on and the stories they tell just aren't as good. Now, Wolfenstein 2, actually, I was excited to play, and now that I've played it, yeah, like I said, maybe I should have just played the first one another time. I wouldn't have actually had to pay for that one. That's my opinion on Wolfenstein 2, though. I'll try to play Young Blood as it comes out. Hopefully I'll come back and be able to tell you, something's different, or at least the multiplayer aspects of it I saw at E3 had me hopeful, because I really hope it's better than 2. If you've enjoyed this, though, do that YouTube stuff. Subscribe, like, ring the bell, comment. Do those things that people do whenever they can. Honestly, I always appreciate it, and I want to thank the subscribers I already have, and of course, the people who watch me. Until next time, I'm King Link, and thank you for watching.